Nike. I mean, what can you even say? It's not just a brand, right? It's a global phenomenon. It's the name you see on the jerseys of legends like Cristiano Ronaldo and Rafael Nadal. To really get a sense of just how massive this company is, you have to look at what they make every single day.
Yeah, you heard that right. Nike pulls in around 1,000 crore rupees, that's over 100 million US dollars every single day. It's a genuine empire. But this empire wasn't built on some grand, bulletproof plan. In fact, it started with the complete opposite. It began with a young guy who had just watched his biggest dream die, resorting to selling shoes out of the back of his car. So how on earth do you get from that guy to a global powerhouse? Well, it all started with a pretty simple idea.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Our story starts with a young man named Phil Knight. Growing up in Oregon, he had one obsession: to become a truly great athlete. And he was a good runner, all through school and college. But then, one morning, at 24 years old, he had to face the music.
He was good, but he knew in his heart he wasn't great. He was one of the best in his state, sure, but he couldn't hang with the best in the country. His athletic career was over. And even though he was heartbroken, he was determined to stay in the world of sports somehow. That's when he remembered a paper he wrote back in business school.
So in this paper, he'd explored how Japanese camera companies had come out of nowhere and completely taken over the American market with high-quality, low-cost products. And a light bulb went off. What if Japanese running shoes could do the same exact thing to the big dogs like Adidas? It sounded like a crazy idea from a class project, but you know what? It was the only idea he had.
So Knight took every penny he had, flew to Japan, and walked into a meeting with Onitsuka, the company that made Tiger shoes. He was terrified. When their executives asked what his company was called, he totally panicked and bluffed. He thought about the blue ribbons he'd won in track and just said Blue Ribbon Sports. The company didn't even exist, but they bought it, and somehow he walked out with a deal to import their shoes to America.
So the idea was suddenly real. But now the hustle began. After waiting an entire year, the first shipment of shoes finally arrived. Knight immediately took them to the one person whose opinion mattered more than anyone's, his old college track coach, Bill Bowerman. And this is where the story really kicks into high gear.
You have to understand, Bowerman wasn't just a coach. The man was obsessed with shoes. He was like a mad scientist of footwear, always tearing shoes apart, gluing on different soles, trying to make them lighter, better, faster. And his experiments actually worked. They made his athletes run faster.
Bowerman loved the Tiger shoes. He loved them so much, he made Knight an offer that completely blew his mind. He wanted to be a 50-50 partner. For Knight, this was insane. This man was a legend, a genius, a leader he looked up to. For him to want in, it was an absolute no-brainer. He said yes on the spot. Blue Ribbon Sports was officially in business.
But being in business didn't mean it was easy. The hustle was real. No sporting goods stores wanted anything to do with them. So Knight did the only thing he could. He loaded up the trunk of his car and drove to every track meet he could find, selling shoes directly to runners and coaches. Because he was one of them, he could connect with them, and the shoes started selling like crazy. But this success led to a massive problem. Every single dollar they earned had to be immediately spent on ordering more shoes. They were growing so fast that they were constantly completely out of cash. The bank cut them off. It got so desperate that Phil had to keep his day job as an accountant and pour his entire salary into Blue Ribbon just to keep the lights on. Despite all the money problems, they were actually succeeding. Bowerman designed a new shoe called the Cortez, and it was a massive hit. Blue Ribbon was absolutely on fire. But it was this very success that was about to lead them straight into a full-blown crisis.
By 1971, sales had hit $1.3 million, and they were doubling every single year. Knight finally quit his accounting job to focus on the company full-time. It seemed like everything was finally falling into place.
And then, just like that, the floor dropped out. Their supplier in Japan, Onitsuka, saw all the success Blue Ribbon was having in the US, and they got greedy. They decided they didn't really need Phil Knight anymore. So they gave him an ultimatum: either sell us a controlling 51% stake in your company, or we cut you off completely. Knight was devastated. He felt completely betrayed. This was a company he had bled for, and now they were trying to steal it right out from under him.
But Knight didn't cave. He gathered his small team and told them that the time for selling someone else's shoes was over. It was time to build their own brand. He severed the partnership with Onitsuka and decided to start all over again, from scratch.
And things moved fast. Knight paid a local graphic design student just $35 to create a logo that suggested motion. And that's how the world got the swoosh. Then an employee had a dream one night about a name, Nike, the Greek goddess of victory. The name just stuck. And just like that, on May 30th, 1971, the Nike brand was born.
Nike grew like crazy through the 70s and became America's top athletic shoe company. But then the 1980s hit, and a new competitor came out of nowhere, completely blindsiding them and threatening to destroy everything they had built.
See, Nike was all about performance for serious athletes. That was their whole identity. But this other company, Reebok, they exploded onto the scene by focusing on the huge aerobics trend and on something Nike had totally ignored, style. People wanted shoes that just looked good, and Reebok gave them that. Suddenly, Nike's sales fell off a cliff, and for the first time ever, they were losing serious money.
Nike desperately needed a miracle, and they found it in a young, almost magical basketball player named Michael Jordan. They signed him and designed a revolutionary shoe. It had bold colors and iconic style, and it was the perfect blend of elite performance and undeniable cool. They called it the Air Jordan.
The result was absolutely staggering. In the very first year, the Air Jordan sold $100 million worth of shoes. This one partnership didn't just save Nike, it launched them into the stratosphere and left Reebok struggling to catch up for good.
So when you look back at the whole journey, from a failed athlete to a hustler selling from his car, to being betrayed, to nearly going broke, you realize that entire struggle forged the philosophy that defines Nike today. This quote from Phil Knight's book really says it all. The idea is one thing, but the relentless, non-stop execution, that's everything. It's about pushing forward no matter what anyone says and simply refusing to quit. In the end, Nike's entire founding story is really baked into those three famous words. It's a story about action, about resilience, about pure will. And it kind of leaves us with a question that's about a lot more than shoes. The question isn't just whether you have a dream, it's whether you have the courage to actually go out and just do it.